I'm Natalie Brooks, 34, and I never thought I'd come home from a business trip to find my own family moving furniture into my house without permission. The security alert on my phone showed my sister Amber directing movers where to place her couch, in my living room. Just weeks earlier, she had cruelly spat, "You don't even have a family," when Grandma left me her Victorian home instead of them. They didn't know I was watching their every move through the security cameras I'd installed. They had no idea what was coming. Before I continue my story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you. Growing up as the middle child in the Brooks family wasn't easy. From my earliest memories, I always felt like I existed in the shadows of my siblings. My older sister Amber, now 37, was the golden child. Captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, and my parents' undisputed favorite. My younger brother Ryan, 30, was the baby of the family, coddled and protected from consequences his entire life. Then there was me, sandwiched between them, often forgotten at school events or family gatherings. "Oh, we thought you were riding with your father," my mother would say when I'd call asking why no one had picked me up from debate club. Or, "We didn't think you'd want to come," when they'd return from a family dinner out. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother, Hazel. She was my refuge in the storm of family dynamics that always seemed to exclude me. While my parents attended every one of Amber's cheerleading competitions and Ryan's mediocre baseball games, Grandma Hazel would come to my honor society inductions and debate tournaments, beaming with pride from the audience. "You're special, Natalie," she would tell me during our Saturday afternoon tea sessions in her Victorian home. "You have a quiet strength they don't understand yet." I took those words to heart and focused on building my own path. While Amber married her high school sweetheart Tyler right after graduation and immediately started depending on my parents for financial help, and Ryan bounced between community college programs never quite finishing anything, I worked my way through state university with scholarships and part-time jobs. After graduating with a finance degree, I landed an entry-level position at a respected financial advisory firm in the city, about 2 hours from my hometown. The distance was a blessing. I built a career through determination and long hours, eventually becoming one of the youngest senior financial advisors in the company's history. Meanwhile, my siblings' financial dependence on our parents only grew worse with time. Amber and Tyler bought a house they couldn't afford in the most exclusive neighborhood they could find, constantly refinancing and asking my parents to co-sign loans. Ryan developed a gambling habit that my parents repeatedly bailed him out of, draining their retirement funds in the process. "They're just going through a rough patch," my mother would defend when I carefully suggested they might be enabling destructive behavior. Family helps family. Unless that family member was me, apparently. When I was struggling to make rent during my first year in the city, my request for a small loan was met with, "You should learn to budget better, Natalie. You're so responsible, we know you'll figure it out." And I did figure it out, without their help. I built an emergency fund, then a healthy investment portfolio, and eventually purchased my own condo. All while Amber and Tyler remodeled their kitchen for the third time with my parents' money, and Ryan lost another job because he just wasn't feeling fulfilled. Through it all, my relationship with Grandma Hazel remained my emotional anchor. I visited her every other weekend, helping maintain her beautiful Victorian home that had been in our family for generations. We'd garden together in her expansive backyard, and she'd tell me stories about her youth while we pruned her prize-winning roses. "This house has seen 5 generations of our family," she once told me as we sat on her wraparound porch. "It knows all our secrets and holds all our tears and laughter." As she aged, those weekend visits became increasingly important. When she turned 85, her health began to decline, and I started coming every weekend, often staying overnight to help with meals and medication. My parents visited occasionally, usually with Amber and her children in tow, for brief, chaotic visits that left Grandma exhausted. "They come to check a box, not to connect," she confided in me after one such visit. "But you, my dear, you come because you care." In her final year, when she needed more consistent care, my parents suggested selling her house and moving her to a facility. I immediately offered an alternative. I would temporarily relocate and work remotely to care for her in her home. My company was understanding, and for 8 months, I lived with Grandma Hazel, managing her medications, taking her to doctor appointments, and most importantly, ensuring she remained in the home she loved. During those months, our bond deepened even further. In the quiet evenings after dinner, she would sometimes bring out old photo albums or family documents, showing me heirlooms and explaining their history. "I want you to know these stories," she said. "Someone needs to remember." One night, about 2 months before she passed, she took my hand and looked me directly in the eyes. "Natalie, I need you to know something. You are the heart of this family, even if they don't see it. Promise me you'll remember that when I'm gone." I promised, not knowing then how soon I would need to hold on to those words, or how fiercely my family would try to make me forget them. Grandma Hazel passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 months ago. I was holding her hand, having dozed off in the chair beside her bed after reading her favorite poetry. The loss hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just my grandmother, she had been my champion, my confidant, and often my only ally. The funeral was a parade of distant relatives and my immediate family performing grief. Amber sobbed dramatically, leaning on Tyler for support, while Ryan looked uncomfortable in his ill-fitting suit, checking his phone when he thought no one was looking. My parents moved through the motions of accepting condolences while I stood slightly apart, my grief too raw and real for their practiced sympathy. A week after the funeral, we all gathered at Mr. Peterson's office, Grandma's attorney for over 30 years. His office was lined with leather-bound law books and smelled of lemon polish and old paper. My parents sat in the center chairs, Amber and Tyler to their right, Ryan slouched to their left. I took the remaining seat on the far end, feeling like an outsider as usual. Mr. Peterson adjusted his reading glasses and began reviewing the will, starting with small personal bequests, jewelry to cousins, small cash gifts to old friends, donations to her church and favorite charities. My family nodded approvingly through these minor distributions. Then came the significant assets. To my granddaughter, Natalie Brooks, Mr. Peterson read, his voice steady, "I leave my home at 1423 Maple Street, including all furnishings and contents therein, as well as my investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $375,000. The silence that followed was absolute. I felt 5 pairs of eyes boring into me as shock rendered me momentarily speechless. "There must be some mistake," my father finally said, breaking the silence. Mr. Peterson looked up from the document. "There is no mistake, Mr. Brooks. Mrs. Hazel was very clear about her wishes." "But that's the family home," my mother protested, her voice rising. "It should stay in the family." "Natalie is family," Mr. Peterson replied calmly. "What about the rest of us?" Amber demanded, her face flushing red. "I have children. We could use that house. Natalie doesn't even have a family." Those words, "you don't even have a family," cut through me like a blade. Just because I wasn't married with children at 34, my own sister was suggesting I wasn't really family. That I didn't deserve the inheritance. That my relationship with our grandmother somehow counted for less. "Amber," Mr. Peterson said firmly, "your grandmother made her decisions quite deliberately. There are provisions for the rest of you as well." The provisions turned out to be considerably smaller, token cash bequests that seemed almost symbolic in comparison. My parents received $25,000, as did Amber and Ryan. Not insignificant sums, but nowhere near the value of the house and portfolio. The meeting deteriorated rapidly after that. My father demanded to see documentation of Grandma's mental competence when she made the will. My mother wept about family legacy and tradition. Ryan accused me of manipulating an old woman, while Amber simply glared at me with undisguised hatred. "You must have known about this," she hissed as we left the office. "You planned this, living with her, playing the devoted granddaughter." "I took care of her because I loved her," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Which is more than any of you did." "We had responsibilities, families," my mother interjected. You were single, it was easier for you. It wasn't easy, I said, memories of sleepless nights and worry-filled days flooding back. It was necessary. She wanted to stay in her home. Our home, my father corrected. The family home that should have gone to all of us. Dad, she left it to me. It was her decision. Well, you need to make this right, he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. You should sell the house and split the proceeds equally. That's the only fair thing to do. I looked at them, my family, seeing for the first time how entitled they truly were. They hadn't been there during Grandma's final months. They hadn't held her hand through painful medical procedures or listened to her stories deep into the night when sleep eluded her. They hadn't earned what she chose to give me. No, I said simply. I'm respecting Grandma's wishes. You selfish bitch, Amber spat. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed at the absurdity. What exactly have you done for me, Amber? When have any of you ever put me first? They had no answer, only anger and accusations. I walked away that day, their voices fading behind me, knowing something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval or inclusion. I was honoring the one person who had truly loved me unconditionally. In the weeks that followed, I received a barrage of texts, calls, and emails, alternating between guilt trips, threats of legal action, and occasional attempts at manipulation through false reconciliation. I responded to none of them, instead focusing on settling into Grandma's, now my, home. The Victorian house needed some updates, but its bones were solid, its character intact. I hired contractors to modernize the kitchen and bathrooms while carefully preserving the original woodwork, stained glass windows, and ornate fireplaces that gave the home its charm. As a precaution, perhaps driven by instinct or simply knowing my family better than I wanted to admit, I had a state-of-the-art security system installed, complete with cameras covering all entrances and main living areas. Better safe than sorry, the security technician commented as he programmed the system to send alerts to my phone. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. 2 weeks after moving into Grandma Hazel's house, my house now, I had to travel to Chicago for an important client meeting. It was my first time leaving the property overnight since the inheritance, and I felt a strange anxiety as I locked up and headed to the airport. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning, with my return flight on Friday evening, giving me just enough time to prepare a comprehensive financial plan for my client's review. The meeting went well, and I was having dinner with colleagues on Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a security alert. Thinking it might be a false alarm, perhaps a neighborhood cat triggering a motion sensor, I casually glanced down at my screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. The alert showed a video clip of my sister Amber directing 2 movers carrying a couch up the front steps of my house. Behind them, my brother Ryan was unloading boxes from an SUV, while my parents stood in the doorway, pointing and gesturing as if they owned the place. They were moving in. To my house. Without my knowledge or permission. I have to go, I told my colleagues abruptly, leaving cash for my portion of the bill as I hurriedly gathered my things. I ran to my hotel room, frantically booked the first available flight home, and spent the night watching in horror as my security system captured my family systematically taking over my house. They brought in furniture, clothing, and personal items. I watched as Amber claimed the master bedroom, my bedroom, tossing my carefully arranged possessions into the hallway to make room for her things. Ryan set up gaming equipment in what had been my planned home office. My parents rearranged the living room furniture, removing Grandma's antique reading chair that I'd specifically kept in its place beside the fireplace. By the time my plane landed the next morning, I was shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I took a rideshare directly from the airport, rehearsing what I would say, trying to prepare myself for the confrontation ahead. Nothing could have prepared me for the casual entitlement that greeted me when I walked through my own front door. "Oh, you're back early," my mother said, looking up from where she was arranging flowers on the dining room table, Grandma's table, now mine. "We thought you'd be gone until tonight. What are you doing in my house?" I asked, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. Don't be dramatic, Natalie, my father replied, emerging from the kitchen with a cup of coffee. This is the family home. We're just moving back in where we belong. You don't belong here. This is my house. Grandma left it to me. And that was a mistake we're correcting, Amber said, descending the stairs in a silk robe as if she already lived there. Tyler followed behind her, giving me an uncomfortable nod. You can't just move in without my permission, I said, still struggling to believe this was happening. Sure we can, Ryan called from the living room, where he was setting up a large television where Grandma's bookcase had been. It's not like you need all this space. You don't even have a family. There it was again, that cruel dismissal, the implication that without a husband and children, I somehow deserved less. That I was less. I want all of you out of my house. Now, I said, my voice gaining strength. Natalie, be reasonable, my mother sighed. Your father and I raised you better than this. Family shares with family. Where was that sharing when I needed help with rent during my first year in the city? I asked. Or when I requested a weekend off from caring for Grandma and none of you could be bothered? That was different, my father waved dismissively. How is it different? I demanded. Look, Tyler interjected, stepping forward with what he probably thought was a reasonable tone, we all have legitimate needs here. Amber and I are facing foreclosure because of some temporary financial setbacks. Your parents had to use their retirement fund to help us out, and now they need a place to stay. Ryan has some gambling debts that need to be cleared up. Those aren't my problems, I said. But they're family problems, my mother insisted. And you have the means to help solve them now. By letting you all move into my house without asking? By having my belongings thrown into the hallway? By watching Ryan dismantle Grandma's bookshelves for his gaming setup? Mom and Dad said Grandma always intended for the house to stay with the whole family, Amber said. She told them that multiple times. I laughed then, a sound without humor. That's interesting, considering Grandma specifically told me she was leaving me the house because she knew the rest of you would sell it immediately to cover your debts. A flash of guilt crossed my father's face before he masked it with indignation. That's not true. She must have been confused near the end. She wasn't confused. She was perfectly lucid, and she made her wishes clear in a legally binding will. Now, I'm going to say this one more time, get out of my house. We're not going anywhere, Amber said, crossing her arms. Grandma verbally promised this house would stay in the family for all of us to use. That's a binding agreement. No, it's not. And if you won't leave voluntarily, I'll have you removed. You wouldn't call the police on your own family, my mother gasped. I pulled out my phone. Watch me. The shock on their faces when I actually dialed 911 would have been comical under different circumstances. I calmly explained to the dispatcher that I had unauthorized persons in my home who were refusing to leave, and yes, I would like officers sent to remove them. You've lost your mind, Ryan sputtered. We're your family. Family doesn't do what you're doing, I replied. Family respects boundaries and wishes. Family doesn't try to take what isn't theirs. The 20 minutes we waited for the police were tense and silent. My family huddled together, occasionally whispering among themselves and throwing angry glances my way. I stood my ground by the front door, refusing to be intimidated in my own home. When the officers arrived, my parents immediately attempted to paint me as the unreasonable one, claiming there had been a family agreement about shared use of the property. Fortunately, I had brought copies of the will and deed transfer paperwork from Mr. Peterson's office, which clearly showed I was the sole legal owner. I understand this is a family dispute, one officer said after reviewing my documentation, but legally, Ms. Brooks has the right to determine who stays in her home. If she's asking you to leave, you need to comply. This is ridiculous, Amber snapped. We're her family. That doesn't give you the right to occupy her property without permission, the officer replied evenly. You need to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. And if we refuse, my father challenged. Then you'll be physically removed and charged with trespassing, the second officer stated. Your choice. The next hour was a flurry of angry packing and bitter accusations. My mother wept dramatically about ungrateful children. My father maintained stony silence. Amber continued to insist that I was violating some non-existent family agreement. Ryan sulked as he disconnected his gaming equipment. As they finally loaded the last of their hastily packed belongings into their vehicles, Amber paused on the front porch. This isn't over, Natalie, she said, her voice low and threatening. You've chosen a house over your family. You'll regret that decision. No, Amber, I replied, standing in the doorway of my home. You chose entitlement over respect. That's a decision I think you'll regret far more. As I watched them drive away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief, anger, sadness, and underneath it all, a newfound resolve. This house was mine, not just legally but spiritually. Grandma Hazel had entrusted it to me because she knew I would honor its history and her memory. I closed the door, locked it, and began the process of reclaiming my space, unaware that this confrontation was just the beginning of a much larger battle to come. The week following the police-assisted eviction of my family was relatively quiet, the calm before the storm, as it turned out. I spent those days restoring order to my home, returning my belongings to their proper places, and erasing the evidence of their attempted takeover. I took time off work to oversee additional security upgrades, changing all locks, adding window sensors, and installing a more sophisticated camera system with cloud storage. Then the storm hit. It started with a Facebook post from Amber, heartbroken that my own sister would call the police on her family rather than help us in our time of need. Grandma Hazel would be so disappointed to see her beloved family home being used as a weapon against her own children and grandchildren. The post was accompanied by childhood photos of all of us together at the house, carefully selected to create a narrative of family harmony that had never actually existed. Within hours, it had dozens of sympathetic comments and shares from extended family members and hometown acquaintances. My phone began buzzing constantly with text messages and calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all demanding explanations or offering unsolicited advice about doing the right thing. Cousins I'd played with as a child but who had never kept in touch were suddenly deeply concerned about the family legacy being destroyed. Uncle Pete, my father's brother, left a particularly scathing voicemail. Your grandmother would be ashamed of your selfishness. That house has been in our family for generations, and you're hoarding it like some kind of miser. I never took you for the greedy type, Natalie, but I guess money changes people. I found it interesting that none of these concerned relatives had offered to help during Grandma's final months when I was caring for her alone. Their sudden interest in family unity seemed directly proportional to the value of the inheritance. 3 days after Amber's initial post, I received an alert that someone was attempting to access my back door while I was at work. The security footage showed Ryan using what appeared to be a credit card to try to slip the lock, apparently unaware that I'd upgraded to deadbolts that couldn't be manipulated that way. After several failed attempts, he left, looking frustrated and glancing nervously over his shoulder. That evening, I contacted Mr. Peterson to discuss filing for a restraining order. He agreed it was a prudent step given the circumstances and suggested I document any further incidents meticulously. This type of family dispute can get messy quickly, he warned. Your grandmother anticipated there might be issues, which is why she was so clear and specific in her will. Did she say anything to you about why she left the house to me specifically? I asked. I'm not at liberty to discuss our private conversations beyond the legal documents, he replied carefully, but I can tell you she was of sound mind and very deliberate in her decisions. The next day, while reorganizing Grandma's bedroom, which I'd kept largely intact out of respect, I noticed something odd, several empty spaces in her jewelry box where I distinctly remembered seeing pieces during my caregiving months. The antique pearl earrings she wore on special occasions were missing, as was a diamond brooch that had belonged to her mother. At first, I thought I might be misremembering, but when I checked the home inventory I'd created after moving in, complete with photos, my suspicions were confirmed. Several valuable items were indeed missing, likely taken during my family's brief occupation of the house. I added theft to my growing list of complaints for the restraining order application, feeling a deep sense of betrayal that went beyond the attempted house takeover. These were pieces of family history, items with sentimental value that far outweighed their monetary worth. My friend Rachel, who had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, came over that evening to help me continue organizing. We'd been friends since college, and she was one of the few people who truly understood my complicated family dynamics. "You know they're not going to stop, right?" she said as we sorted through old photographs in the living room. "People who feel entitled to what you have rarely back down easily. What more can they do?" I asked. "They can't legally take the house. They can make your life difficult in other ways," she replied. "Stay vigilant, and don't let them gaslight you into thinking you're the unreasonable one here. Grandma left you this house for a reason." Rachel's warning proved prophetic the very next day when my office receptionist called to tell me my sister was in the lobby, demanding to see me. I asked security to escort her out, only to learn later that she had approached several of my clients in the parking lot, telling them I was mentally unstable and making poor financial decisions due to grief. Fortunately, my professional reputation was solid enough that none of my clients took her seriously, but the boundary violation was disturbing. What was even more concerning was the email I received from my father that evening, mentioning that the family was exploring options to contest the will based on new evidence about Grandma's mental state. I forwarded the email to Mr. Peterson, who assured me such a challenge would be extremely unlikely to succeed given the medical documentation of Grandma's competence and the properly executed legal documents. Still, the threat itself was stressful and indicated my family wasn't going to accept reality anytime soon. The final straw came a week later when I received a call from my home security company while in a client meeting. "Ms. Brooks, we've detected unauthorized entry at your residence," the security representative informed me. "The alarm was deactivated using a valid code, but according to your settings, you're currently not at home. Would you like us to dispatch police?" I felt a chill run through me. "Yes, immediately. I'm not home, and no one should be in my house." I excused myself from the meeting and raced home, arriving just as police were questioning Amber, who was standing on my front porch looking both angry and embarrassed. "She has a key," Amber was insisting to the officers. "She gave me permission to pick up some family photos." "This is all a misunderstanding." "That's a lie," I said as I approached. "I never gave her a key or permission to enter my home." The officers turned to me for confirmation, and I explained the ongoing family dispute and the recent attempts to access my property. "She must have made a copy of my key during their attempted move-in," I realized aloud. "I changed the locks, but not before they had access to my house for several hours." The alarm code was easier to explain. I had used the same code Grandma had set years ago, a family birthdate that all of us knew. I immediately had the security company reset it to something completely unrelated to my family. Amber wasn't arrested, as she left willingly when instructed by the officers, but the incident was documented for my restraining order application. As she walked to her car, she turned back with a look of pure hatred. "We know what you did to manipulate Grandma," she called out. "We're going to prove it, and then everyone will see who you really are." Her words left me deeply unsettled. What exactly were they planning? And how far were they willing to go to take what they believed should be theirs? I spent that night reviewing my security footage from recent days, and what I found was disturbing. There had been multiple instances of family members driving slowly past my house, sometimes stopping to take photos. On 2 occasions, I spotted Ryan in the background, apparently testing blind spots in my camera coverage. They were surveilling my house, looking for weaknesses in my security. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore, it felt like a coordinated campaign to undermine me and reclaim what they viewed as rightfully theirs. The next morning, I installed additional cameras to cover the blind spots and scheduled an appointment with a locksmith to change all exterior locks again, this time to high-security models that couldn't be easily duplicated. I also called Mr. Peterson to expedite the restraining order application and inquire about additional legal protections I might need. "Document everything," he advised. Every communication, every sighting, every attempt to access your property or contact you inappropriately. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of determination and sadness. I was prepared to defend what was legally mine, but I mourned the loss of what family should be: supportive, loving, respectful. Instead, I was installing security cameras to protect myself from the very people who should have had my back. Grandma Hazel's words came back to me: "You have a quiet strength they don't understand yet." I would need every ounce of that strength for what was coming next. A month into the conflict, I decided to introduce myself to more of my neighbors. While I'd visited Grandma Hazel regularly for years, I'd never really connected with the people living nearby. Now that this was my permanent home, I wanted to establish positive relationships in the community. I baked several batches of Grandma's famous snickerdoodles and spent a Saturday afternoon going door to door, introducing myself as Hazel's granddaughter who had inherited the house. Most neighbors were welcoming, remembering Grandma fondly and expressing condolences for her passing. At the fourth house, however, I encountered something unexpected. Mrs. Keller, an elderly woman who had lived across the street for decades, regarded me with obvious suspicion when I introduced myself. "You're the one they're worried about?" she asked, frowning slightly. "You seem perfectly normal to me." "I'm sorry?" I said, confused by her reaction. "Your family, your sister especially. They've been telling everyone in the neighborhood that they're concerned about your mental health. Said you've been acting erratically since your grandmother died, making poor decisions, isolating yourself. They asked us to keep an eye on you and report back if we saw anything concerning." I stood there, cookies in hand, momentarily speechless. They were trying to turn my neighbors against me, to paint me as unstable. "Mrs. Keller, I assure you I'm perfectly fine," I finally managed. "My family is upset about my grandmother's will, and they're trying to discredit me because they wanted the house for themselves." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. I had my suspicions. Hazel and I had tea together once a month for 30 years. She mentioned how disappointed she was in the rest of the family for never visiting unless they needed something. "She spoke very highly of you, though." "Thank you for telling me this," I said, relieved to find an ally. "It means a lot to know Grandma had good friends here." "Oh, we all adored Hazel," Mrs. Keller assured me. "And most of us aren't so easily fooled by family drama. Your sister was a bit too eager in her concern, if you know what I mean." As I continued my rounds, I discovered that Amber had indeed approached many neighbors, spinning a tale about my supposed mental decline and isolation. Some had believed her, while others, like Mrs. Keller, had their doubts. It was deeply disturbing to realize how systematically my family was working to undermine me in my own community. The next morning brought an even more alarming development. My boss called me into his office as soon as I arrived at work. "Natalie, I received a concerning email over the weekend," he said, his expression grave. "Someone claiming to be your sister sent documentation suggesting you might be experiencing some personal difficulties that could impact your work with clients." My heart sank. "What kind of documentation?" He slid a folder across his desk. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be prescription bottles for psychiatric medications I had never taken, along with fabricated therapy notes discussing my delusional behavior and paranoid tendencies following grandmother's death. "These are fake," I said immediately. "I'm not taking any of these medications, and I've never seen this therapist. My family is trying to discredit me because of an inheritance dispute." My boss looked relieved. "I thought it might be something like that." The email seemed off, and frankly, nothing in these documents aligns with the Natalie Brooks I know. "You've been one of our most stable and reliable advisors for years." "I appreciate your trust," I said, "but I'm concerned about how far my family is willing to go. They created false medical documentation, that's potentially illegal." "Do you need time off to deal with this?" he asked. "We can reassign your clients temporarily if necessary." "No," I said firmly. "That's exactly what they want, to disrupt my life and career." I'd rather keep working and maintaining normalcy as much as possible. He agreed, and we developed a protocol for handling any further contact from my family at my workplace. I left his office feeling shaken but grateful for his support. The fact that my family would target my professional reputation demonstrated how determined they were to punish me for keeping what was legally mine. That evening, I received an alert from my security system while grocery shopping. Someone had entered my house, again using a valid entry code despite my having changed it after the previous incident. I immediately called the police and rushed home, watching the live security feed on my phone as I drove. The footage showed Amber and Ryan moving through my house, systematically checking drawers and cabinets as if searching for something specific. I arrived just minutes before the police, catching Ryan in Grandma's study, rifling through her desk. "What are you doing?" I demanded, standing in the doorway. He jumped, clearly startled by my sudden appearance. "Natalie. We were just breaking into my house again? Searching through my things? What exactly are you looking for, Ryan?" Before he could answer, Amber appeared behind me. "We're looking for evidence," she said, her voice cold. "We know Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she made that will. We know you manipulated her." "That's not true, and you know it," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Grandma was perfectly lucid until the very end." "Then why did we find these?" Amber pulled several prescription bottles from her purse. "Medications that can cause confusion and impaired judgment in elderly patients. We found them hidden in her bedroom." I stared at the bottles, immediately recognizing them as fakes similar to the ones they'd sent to my workplace. "Those aren't real. Grandma's medications were all properly logged and administered under hospice supervision. There's documentation of everything she took." "We'll see what a judge has to say," Amber smirked, just as police sirens became audible outside. When the officers arrived, I explained the situation, including the previous break-in and the ongoing harassment. I showed them the falsified prescription bottles, which Amber claimed they had discovered during their previous unauthorized entry. "Officer, these are fake," I insisted. "I was my grandmother's caregiver for 8 months. I coordinated with her doctors and hospice nurses. These medications were never prescribed to her." "We found them hidden in her mattress," Amber countered. "Obviously Natalie didn't want anyone to know she was drugging our grandmother to influence her will." "That's ridiculous," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "Why would I be showing you the bottles now if I had hidden them?" The officers, recognizing this was beyond a simple trespassing case, separated us for individual questioning. While one officer spoke with Amber and Ryan in the living room, the other interviewed me in the kitchen. "Has there been any indication they might plant false evidence?" the officer asked quietly. "Yes," I explained about the falsified medical documents sent to my workplace. "They're trying to build a case that my grandmother wasn't mentally competent when she made her will, despite all evidence to the contrary." As we spoke, my security system sent another alert to my phone: motion detected in the upstairs guest bedroom, which should have been empty since both Amber and Ryan were downstairs with us. I showed the officer my phone screen, which displayed someone moving around the room. "There's someone else in the house," I whispered. The officer immediately radioed his partner, who confirmed that only Amber and Ryan had been present when they arrived. We quietly moved upstairs, the officer leading with his hand near his weapon, and found the guest bedroom door closed. When the officer opened it, we discovered Tyler, Amber's husband, hurriedly placing something in the nightstand drawer. "Sir, put your hands where I can see them," the officer ordered. Tyler complied, looking panicked. "I can explain. I was just—" "He was planting more false evidence," I interrupted, moving toward the nightstand. Inside the drawer was a handwritten letter, supposedly from my grandmother, expressing concerns about my mental health and stating that she felt pressured to change her will in my favor. The handwriting was a poor imitation of Grandma's distinctive script, something anyone who knew her would immediately recognize as fake. "This isn't my grandmother's handwriting," I told the officer, hands shaking with anger and disbelief. "They're trying to frame me. With 3 people now caught breaking into my home and apparent evidence of a conspiracy to commit fraud, the officers had enough probable cause to take Amber, Ryan, and Tyler to the station for further questioning. As they were being escorted out, I noticed Ryan hanging back, looking conflicted. "Natalie," he said quietly when the others were out of earshot, "I didn't know they were planning to plant evidence. I just went along because." "Because what, Ryan?" I asked, exhausted by the whole situation. "Because they said if we got the house, my debts would be paid off." He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "But this has gone too far. Amber's obsessed with getting the house. Mom and Dad are encouraging her because they want to move in too. They made up this whole plan to have you declared incompetent so they could challenge the will." His confession, while infuriating, provided valuable confirmation of what I had suspected. My family wasn't just upset about the inheritance, they had orchestrated a calculated campaign to discredit me and seize what legally belonged to me. After the police left with my family members in custody, I sat in Grandma's study, the place where she had spent so many hours reading and writing, and tried to process the magnitude of this betrayal. Not just the inheritance dispute, not just the break-ins, but the systematic attempt to destroy my reputation and possibly my career. As I sat in her favorite chair, I noticed something odd about the antique desk drawer. It seemed shallower on the inside than its external dimensions would suggest. Curious, I removed the drawer completely and discovered a hidden compartment underneath, containing a leather-bound journal I had never seen before. Opening it, I recognized Grandma Hazel's handwriting immediately, her real handwriting, not the poor imitation my family had created. The journal was dated from the beginning of my time as her caregiver, and the first entry made me catch my breath. "Natalie moved in today to help care for me. The others think I don't know what they're planning, but I've always seen more than they realize. This journal will be my insurance policy, and Natalie's protection when I'm gone." With trembling hands, I turned the page, unprepared for the secrets I was about to discover. The journal in my hands felt like a time capsule, a direct connection to Grandma Hazel that I hadn't expected to find. I settled deeper into her reading chair, turned on the lamp beside me, and began to read. The early entries confirmed what I had always suspected but never fully known: my family had been taking financial advantage of Grandma for years before I became her caregiver. "Ryan came by today asking for another loan," she wrote in an entry dated 5 years earlier. "That makes $45,000 this year alone. He thinks I don't know about the gambling, but Mrs. Keller's grandson works at that casino in the city. Nothing stays secret in a small town." Another entry detailed how my parents had convinced her to co-sign on a loan for their vacation home, then stopped making payments, forcing her to cover them to protect her own credit. "They said it was an investment opportunity," she wrote. "The only thing I've invested in is their irresponsibility." But the most revealing entries concerned Amber and Tyler, who had apparently been the most aggressive in their financial demands. "Amber brought paperwork today for me to sign. Said it was just updating my will, but I recognized a power of attorney form buried in the middle. When I refused to sign without my lawyer present, she became quite upset. Said I clearly didn't trust my own family. Trust must be earned, my dear." As I continued reading, I discovered that Grandma had been keeping meticulous records of every financial request, every loan that was never repaid, every attempt to access her assets. She had even installed a small recording device in her study, legal in our state, which requires only one-party consent for recordings. "I may be old, but I'm not a fool," she wrote. "I've recorded every conversation about money in this room for the past 3 years. Natalie is the only one who has never asked me for a penny. She's the only one who gives rather than takes." The journal explained why she had made her decision about the inheritance. "I've decided to leave the house and my investments to Natalie. The others will be angry, but they've taken enough. They would sell this house immediately to cover their debts, and 150 years of family history would disappear. Natalie understands the value of legacy and hard work. She'll preserve what matters." Most shocking were the entries from her final months, when she was aware that her health was failing. "Amber visited today while Natalie was picking up my prescriptions. She didn't know I was awake and listening from my bedroom. She was going through my financial papers, taking photos with her phone. When Natalie returned, Amber pretended she had just arrived. I must warn Natalie what she's up against. The last entry was dated just 3 days before Grandma passed away. I've spoken with Mr. Peterson and made everything legally airtight. I've recorded my statement of intent and mental clarity for the will. I've documented every attempt by the family to access my assets improperly. I'm leaving this journal where Natalie will find it when she needs it most. My dear girl will face their anger, but she won't face it unprepared. They underestimate her quiet strength, just as they've always underestimated mine. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Not just from grief, but from the profound realization that Grandma had seen everything clearly and had been protecting me even beyond her death. She had anticipated exactly what would happen and had prepared accordingly. The journal wasn't just a record of family misconduct, it was a roadmap for defending myself against their claims. Along with her written observations, Grandma had preserved bank statements showing the thousands of dollars given to my family members, notes from conversations where they pressured her for money, and most importantly, a USB drive containing audio recordings of key interactions. I spent the entire night listening to the recordings and organizing the evidence. There was my father, pressuring Grandma to sign over her stock portfolio to simplify her finances. There was Amber, angrily insisting that Grandma owed her money for all the times I've helped you out, though the journal noted Amber had rarely visited unless she wanted something. There was Ryan, tearfully promising to pay back just one more loan that he never intended to repay. And most damning of all, there was a recording from just 2 months before Grandma died, when my parents, Amber, and Tyler had visited together. Thinking Grandma was napping, they had openly discussed plans to sell the house immediately after her death, with Amber saying, "Once we get this place on the market, we can finally clear our debts and have some breathing room." Grandma had captured it all, creating an irrefutable record of their true intentions that directly contradicted their current claims about keeping the house in the family. Armed with this evidence, I began formulating a strategic plan. Rather than simply reacting to their attacks, I would take control of the situation. I contacted Mr. Peterson the next morning and arranged an urgent meeting to share what I had discovered. "This changes everything," he said after reviewing the journal and recordings. "They can't claim your grandmother was mentally incompetent when she made the will. These recordings demonstrate clear cognitive function and deliberate intent." "What about their break-ins and the false evidence they planted?" I asked. "That's potentially criminal," he replied. "Breaking and entering, attempted fraud, falsifying medical documents, these are serious offenses. The restraining order is just the beginning of what we can do legally." Together, we developed a comprehensive strategy. First, I would compile all evidence of breaking and entering, including security footage and police reports from the recent incident. Second, I would document the false medical documentation they had created and sent to my workplace, which constituted both fraud and potential defamation. Third, I would gather statements from neighbors like Mrs. Keller about my family's attempts to spread rumors about my mental health. Fourth, I would meet with Grandma's former hospice nurses and doctors to obtain official documentation of her mental clarity and the exact medications she had been prescribed, proof that would expose the falsified prescription bottles as fraudulent. Fifth, I would use Grandma's recordings and journal as evidence of the family's true intentions regarding the house, directly contradicting their current claims. "But here's my suggestion," Mr. Peterson said thoughtfully. "Don't show your full hand immediately. Let them think their strategy might be working. Draw them out further." "You mean let them think I'm vulnerable?" I asked, uncertain about this approach. "Exactly. If they believe you're on the defensive, they'll become more bold, potentially incriminating themselves further. Sometimes the best strategy is to appear weak when you're actually in a position of strength." The lawyer's advice made strategic sense, but emotionally, it was difficult to consider. I'd already felt victimized by my family, pretending to be more vulnerable seemed counterintuitive. "Trust me," Mr. Peterson insisted, "your grandmother played the same strategy. She let them think she was an easy target while documenting everything. It's why you have such compelling evidence now. Reluctantly, I agreed to the plan. Over the next week, I quietly gathered all the documentation we needed while publicly appearing shaken by the recent events. I took time off work, citing emotional distress, which wasn't entirely untrue. I made sure my family heard through mutual acquaintances that I was reconsidering my position on the house. The bait worked almost immediately. My mother called, her voice honeyed with false concern. "Natalie, dear, we're all so worried about you. This situation has gotten out of hand, and we just want to sit down as a family and work things out. No lawyers, no police, just us finding a solution together." "I don't know, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice sound tired and uncertain. "After everything that's happened." "That's all just unfortunate misunderstandings," she insisted. "We love you, and we want what's best for everyone. Why don't we meet at the house this weekend? Just talk things through?" I agreed to the meeting, knowing it was an opportunity to confront them with the full weight of evidence I had accumulated. Mr. Peterson advised me to have the meeting recorded legally. Our state's one-party consent law meant I didn't need to inform them. And to have him arrive partway through the conversation. "Let them reveal their true intentions first," he suggested. "Once they've shown their hand, I'll arrive with the documentation, and we can present our case from a position of strength." As the weekend approached, I prepared both emotionally and strategically for what would likely be the final confrontation with my family. I reviewed Grandma's journal repeatedly, drawing strength from her words and her foresight. "You have a quiet strength they don't understand yet," she had written. The time had come to show them exactly what that meant. Saturday morning arrived with an appropriate dramatic flair. Thunder rumbled in the distance as dark clouds gathered over the Victorian rooftop. I had spent the previous evening setting the stage, positioning hidden recording devices throughout the living room, all legal in our one-party consent state, preparing copies of key evidence in labeled folders, and coordinating timing with Mr. Peterson, who would arrive exactly 1 hour into our family meeting. My family arrived precisely at 10 a.m., entering with the entitled air of people who already considered the house their own. My mother immediately began fussing over the furniture arrangement, commenting that the sofa really worked better against the other wall, "Don't you think?" My father headed straight for Grandma's antique liquor cabinet, pouring himself a bourbon without asking permission. Amber and Tyler surveyed the room with calculating eyes, while Ryan hung back awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. "Thank you all for coming," I said, intentionally making my voice soft and slightly shaky. "I think we need to resolve this situation." "Absolutely, dear," my mother said, her tone dripping with artificial sweetness. "We're so glad you're finally being reasonable." "We just want what's fair for everyone," my father added, settling into Grandma's favorite armchair with his drink. "This whole situation has gotten out of hand." I nodded, keeping my expression deliberately vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot about what family really means." "Exactly." Amber jumped in eagerly. "Family should come first. That's what Grandma would have wanted." I noticed she avoided mentioning the break-ins, the planted evidence, or any of their other underhanded tactics. In their minds, those actions were already being swept under the rug as we moved toward their desired outcome. "So what are you thinking, Natalie?" Tyler asked, leaning forward with barely concealed anticipation. "About the house and everything?" "I'm considering options," I said vaguely. "But before we discuss solutions, I'd like to understand exactly what everyone wants and why." It was the perfect open-ended prompt, and they took the bait immediately. "Well, it's simple," my father began confidently. "This house should benefit the entire family, not just one person. Your mother and I need a place to live now that our retirement savings are, well, not what we planned." He carefully avoided mentioning that those savings had been depleted bailing out my siblings. "And Amber and Tyler have the children to consider," my mother added. 3 bedrooms in this house would be perfect for them. "Plus we're facing foreclosure," Amber said bluntly. "The bank is giving us until the end of the month. If we don't come up with a solution, we'll be homeless, with kids." And Ryan needs a fresh start, my father continued. A stable living situation would help him get back on his feet. I nodded sympathetically. So essentially, you all need a place to live rent-free because of financial difficulties? It's not just that, my mother protested. This is the family home. It should stay in the family. By staying in the family, you mean all of you living here? I clarified. Not me selling it and splitting the proceeds? They exchanged glances, and my father cleared his throat. Well, selling would be a last resort. The market isn't great right now. We'd get much more value using it as a residence. I see, I said. And what about Grandma's wishes? She specifically left the house to me alone. She wasn't thinking clearly, Amber said dismissively. You know how confused she got toward the end. Did I? I asked innocently. I was her caregiver for 8 months. I didn't notice significant confusion. That's because you were manipulating her, Amber said, her tone hardening slightly. Isolating her from the rest of us, filtering her information. Is that what you believe happened? I asked, maintaining my appearance of emotional uncertainty while inwardly noting how quickly their facade of family unity was cracking. We know it happened, my father stated firmly. Grandma had always said this house would stay available for any family member who needed it. Then suddenly, after months with only you around, she changed everything? It doesn't add up. Unless she had reasons to change her mind, I suggested quietly. What reasons could possibly justify cutting out most of her family? My mother demanded. I took a deep breath, watching the clock. 20 minutes into the conversation, and they were already showing their true colors. I decided to push a little further. Let's be honest with each other, I said. If I agreed to let you all move in, how would that work practically? Who would pay the property taxes? The utilities? The maintenance on a house this size? Another exchange of glances before my father answered smoothly, we'd work out a fair arrangement. Everyone contributing what they can. Based on your current financial situations, what exactly could each of you contribute? I pressed. The uncomfortable silence that followed was telling. We'd figure it out, Amber finally said defensively. The point is, this should be a family decision, not yours alone. And if I disagreed? I asked. If I wanted to keep living here by myself as Grandma intended? Tyler leaned forward, his expression darkening. Then we'd have no choice but to pursue legal options. We've been gathering evidence about your grandmother's mental state and your undue influence. The planted prescription bottles? The fake therapy notes? I asked, my voice still calm despite my racing heart. Ryan shifted uncomfortably while Amber shot him an accusatory glance. We have legitimate concerns, my mother insisted. Your behavior has been erratic since Grandma died. The way you've cut off your family, called the police on us, these aren't the actions of someone thinking clearly. So your position is that I'm mentally unstable and manipulated my grandmother into changing her will? I summarized. And based on that, you believe you should have control of this house? We believe we should all have a share, my father corrected. Equal access for all family members. And if a court disagrees? I asked. Amber's expression hardened. We have options beyond the courts. The neighbors already think you're unstable. Your boss has received concerning documentation. Your reputation could suffer significantly if you continue fighting us on this. And there it was, the direct threat, exactly as Mr. Peterson had predicted. I checked the time. 55 minutes had passed. Perfect timing. So to summarize, I said, my voice finally dropping its vulnerable pretense, you want this house because you've all mismanaged your finances and need a place to live rent-free. You've broken in multiple times, planted false evidence, spread rumors about my mental health, and are now threatening my professional reputation if I don't comply. Have I understood correctly? They stared at me, clearly caught off guard by my sudden shift in tone. That's not what we're saying at all, my mother sputtered. We're concerned about you, Natalie. No, you're concerned about yourselves, I replied firmly. And I have proof. The doorbell rang right on cue. I stood to answer it, leaving my family exchanging nervous glances in the living room. Mr. Peterson entered with a briefcase, followed by a court reporter I had arranged to transcribe the meeting officially. Perfect timing, I said, leading them into the living room. We were just getting to the heart of the matter. What is this? My father demanded, standing up. We agreed to a family meeting, not a legal ambush. Consider it a professional courtesy, Mr. Peterson replied calmly. Rather than serving you with legal documents at your homes or workplaces, Ms. Brooks thought a private setting would be more dignified. Legal documents? My mother echoed, her face paling. What legal documents? I gestured for Mr. Peterson to explain while I took a seat, watching their expressions carefully. First, he began, opening his briefcase, a restraining order prohibiting any of you from coming within 500 feet of this property or Ms. Brooks' workplace without explicit written permission. He handed copies to each family member, continuing methodically. Second, documentation of breaking and entering, including security footage from multiple incidents and police reports. More papers distributed, more shocked expressions. Third, evidence of attempted fraud through falsified medical and psychological documentation sent to Ms. Brooks' employer. My boss had been furious when I showed him the full extent of their deception, immediately providing a sworn statement for our legal proceedings. Fourth, witness statements from neighbors regarding attempts to spread defamatory rumors about Ms. Brooks' mental health. Mrs. Keller had been particularly thorough in her statement, documenting dates and times of Amber's visits to various neighbors. And finally, Mr. Peterson said, placing a USB drive and a leather-bound journal on the coffee table, recorded evidence collected by Hazel Brooks herself, documenting years of financial exploitation by family members and her explicit intentions regarding the distribution of her estate. The room fell completely silent. My family stared at the journal and USB drive as if they were snakes about to strike. This is ridiculous, Amber finally sputtered. Recordings? That's illegal. Not in this state, Mr. Peterson replied smoothly. Single-party consent makes these recordings entirely admissible in court. What exactly are you threatening us with? My father demanded, attempting to regain control of the situation. This isn't a threat, I said quietly. It's a reality check. Grandma wasn't confused or manipulated. She was perfectly aware of how you've all treated her over the years, the constant demands for money, the loans never repaid, the pressure to sign over assets. She documented everything. I opened the journal to a marked page and read aloud, Amber and Tyler visited today asking for $20,000 to renovate their kitchen. When I suggested they start with something more affordable, Amber became hostile, saying I clearly loved my antique furniture more than my own grandchildren. They don't seem to understand the difference between loving someone and financing their poor decisions. Amber's face flushed red. That's taken out of context. Would you prefer to hear the actual recording? I asked, gesturing to the USB drive. Grandma had a device in her study. It captured some very interesting conversations, including one where you and Tyler discussed selling this house immediately after her death to finally be free of debt. That was 2 months before she passed. You can't prove when that was recorded, Tyler interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. The recordings are all date and time-stamped, Mr. Peterson confirmed. And they correspond with visitor logs from the hospice service. Ryan, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. It's true. I was there for some of those conversations. He turned to me, his expression defeated. They'd been planning this for years, Natalie. I went along with it because, well, I owed them money, and they promised to clear my debts if I helped. Ryan, my mother gasped. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done, he replied firmly. I broke into Natalie's house. I helped plant evidence. I lied to the police. I could go to jail for this, and for what? So Amber and Tyler can have a bigger house? So Dad can pretend he didn't waste his retirement bailing us out? His unexpected confession shifted the dynamic in the room completely. My parents looked stunned, while Amber glared at him with undisguised fury. "You ungrateful little," she began, but Mr. Peterson interrupted. "I suggest you all consider your positions carefully," he advised. "Ms. Brooks has enough evidence for multiple criminal and civil complaints. Breaking and entering, attempted fraud, defamation, elder financial abuse regarding her grandmother. These are serious matters with potentially serious consequences." "What do you want, Natalie?" my father finally asked, his voice subdued. "I want what Grandma wanted," I replied. "For this house to remain with someone who respects its history and her wishes. I want you all to stop trying to take what isn't yours and start taking responsibility for your own choices. And I want you to leave me alone." "And if we refuse?" Amber challenged, though her bravado was clearly forced. In response, I played one of the recordings. Amber's voice clearly audible discussing with Tyler how they could have me declared incompetent to invalidate the will. The naked calculation in her tone was chilling even to me, and I'd already heard it multiple times. When the recording finished, the silence in the room was absolute. "That's illegal," Mr. Peterson stated unnecessarily. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, at minimum." "Here's what's going to happen," I said, standing up to address my family directly. "You're going to sign these agreements Mr. Peterson has prepared, acknowledging Grandma's will as valid and legally binding, and agreeing to cease all attempts to contest it. You're going to abide by the restraining order and have no contact with me without written permission. In exchange, I won't press criminal charges for the breaking and entering or attempted fraud." "And if we don't sign?" my father asked, though his defeated tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then we proceed with both criminal and civil complaints," Mr. Peterson replied. "The evidence is substantial and well documented." One by one, they signed the agreements, my parents first, then Tyler, then Amber, after a considerable show of resistance. Ryan had already agreed to sign as part of his statement against the others. As they prepared to leave, Amber paused at the doorway, turning back with tears of anger in her eyes. "You've chosen a house over your family. I hope you're happy living here all alone." I met her gaze steadily. "I haven't chosen a house over family, Amber. I've chosen respect over exploitation, honesty over manipulation, and responsibility over entitlement. Grandma made the same choice. That's why she left the house to me." After they left, I stood in the entryway of my home, truly my home now, in every sense, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, vindication, and lingering sadness for what family should have been but never was for me. "Your grandmother would be proud," Mr. Peterson said quietly as he gathered his documents. "She knew exactly what she was doing when she chose you." I smiled, running my hand along the polished wood of the banister Grandma had loved. "Yes, she did. She always saw more than they realized." 1 year later, I stood on the wraparound porch of my Victorian home, watching as friends and neighbors gathered on the expansive lawn for what had become a monthly tradition, a community potluck dinner hosted at the Brooks family home. Children played tag between the ancient oak trees while adults chatted in small groups, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over everything. The house behind me had been transformed, though not in the way my family had envisioned. After the confrontation, I had invested time and resources into carefully renovating the space, preserving its historical character while updating it for modern living. The original hardwood floors gleamed with new polish, the stained glass windows had been professionally restored, and Grandma Hazel's prized rose garden had been expanded to include a community vegetable plot that neighborhood children helped tend. The legal aftermath of my family's actions had unfolded largely as Mr. Peterson predicted. The restraining orders remained in place, though they had never been tested. My parents had moved to Arizona shortly after the confrontation, apparently finding the small-town scrutiny too uncomfortable after word of their behavior spread. Amber and Tyler had faced more significant consequences. Their attempt to falsify medical documents had triggered an investigation that uncovered other fraudulent activities, including insurance scams they'd been running for years. They were currently dealing with the legal ramifications, which included probation and substantial community service hours. The most surprising development had been Ryan. After his confession and cooperation, he had entered a gambling addiction recovery program and, with my cautious support, begun rebuilding his life. We weren't close, too much had happened for immediate trust, but we had established a tentative relationship based on clear boundaries and his continued commitment to personal accountability. Earth to Natalie, a voice broke into my thoughts. Rachel, my college friend who had supported me throughout the ordeal, nudged me gently. You're doing that 1,000-yard stare again. Penny for your thoughts? I smiled, accepting the glass of lemonade she offered. Just reflecting on how much has changed in a year. For the better, she noted, gesturing toward the gathering. You've created something special here. She wasn't wrong. What had started as a small dinner with Rachel and a few supportive neighbors had grown into a vibrant community hub. Mrs. Keller and her book club now met in Grandma's parlor every Wednesday. I hosted financial literacy workshops in the dining room once a month, helping local families navigate the complexities of budgeting and investing, something Grandma would have thoroughly approved of. Natalie, called out Mrs. Keller from her seat under the oak tree. Tell everyone about the scholarship fund. I smiled, setting down my lemonade to address the curious faces now turned toward me. It's official as of yesterday, I announced. The Hazel Brooks Memorial Scholarship will provide financial support to a local student pursuing higher education each year, with preference given to those studying finance or social work. The news was met with applause and congratulations. The scholarship had been my way of extending Grandma's legacy beyond the physical boundaries of the house, using a portion of the investment portfolio she had left me to help others pursue their dreams through education, just as she had encouraged me to do. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the yard had been tidied, I retreated to what had once been Grandma's study and was now my home office. I had preserved much of its original character, the antique desk, the wall of bookshelves, the comfortable reading chair, while adding my own touches, framed financial certifications alongside Grandma's needlepoint, a modern computer beside her antique typewriter. I opened the bottom desk drawer, removing a small wooden box I had discovered 6 months after the confrontation with my family. It had been hidden in a secret compartment in Grandma's closet, with my name written on the lid in her elegant handwriting. Inside was a letter I had read countless times, yet still found new meaning in with each revisit. My dearest Natalie. If you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever adventure comes next, and you found your way to this hiding place, always the clever one you were. There's something I never told you, something I hope you understand now. Family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we create through love, respect, and shared values. Your parents and siblings never understood that a family name means nothing without the character to honor it. You have that character, Natalie. I've watched you build a life on your own terms, with integrity and quiet determination. Never apologize for protecting what you've earned or for expecting basic decency from those who claim to love you. The house is yours now, but remember, it's not just walls and a roof. It's a vessel for memories, for connections, for a life fully lived. Fill it with laughter, with friends who become family, with purpose. That's what I tried to do, and in you, I see the perfect person to continue that tradition. I suspect my decision has caused you difficulties with the others. They never could accept that actions have consequences or that love doesn't equate to endless financial support. Stand firm, my dear. You have more strength than even you realize. With all my love and complete confidence. Grandma Hazel. I carefully refold the letter, tracing my finger over her signature before returning it to its box. In the year since finding it, I had worked to fulfill her vision for the house, transforming it from a source of family conflict into a center for community and growth. The most profound change, however, had been within myself. The painful confrontation with my birth family had freed me from a lifetime of seeking their approval and acceptance. In its place, I had created what Grandma Hazel described, a chosen family of friends and neighbors who shared values of mutual respect and genuine care. I had also found unexpected purpose in my professional life. After word spread about my experience, I began receiving requests to help other individuals navigate family financial conflicts. With additional certification in elder financial abuse prevention, I now dedicated part of my practice to protecting vulnerable seniors and helping families establish healthy financial boundaries. As I prepared for bed that night, I paused in front of the antique mirror that had once belonged to Grandma's mother. The woman reflected back at me looked different from the one who had discovered family members moving into her house a year earlier, more confident, more peaceful, with a quiet strength that no longer needed external validation. I thought of Amber's parting words, "I hope you're happy living here all alone," and how utterly wrong she had been. This house wasn't a lonely fortress, it was the heart of a community I had helped nurture. I wasn't isolated, I was connected to people who genuinely cared about me, not what I could give them. As for my birth family, I had learned to release the anger without forgetting the lessons. Ryan's tentative steps toward recovery had shown me that change was possible, even if reconciliation remained a distant possibility rather than an immediate goal. The others had made their choices, just as Grandma and I had made ours. The antique clock in the hallway, the one Grandma had wound faithfully every Sunday morning, chimed softly, marking the hour. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, a meeting with potential scholarship recipients, a community garden planning session, clients seeking guidance on building financial security. I switched off the light, feeling Grandma Hazel's presence in the familiar creaks of the floorboards and the gentle whisper of the old house settling for the night. Her final gift hadn't been just the physical property or financial security, it had been the courage to define family on my own terms and the wisdom to recognize my own worth. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered into the darkness, knowing somehow that she heard me. As I drifted off to sleep in the house that had witnessed 5 generations of Brooks family history, I smiled at the thought that its best chapters were still being written, not as a battleground for entitlement and greed, but as a sanctuary for growth, community, and genuine connection. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you ultimately deserve. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-respect is recognizing when to hold your ground and redefine what family truly means. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Your story might help someone else find the courage to protect their boundaries too. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for being part of my chosen family here on this channel, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Until next time.